The galaxy had forgotten what light meant, Captain. Vexmar of the Vorthok Empire pressed his clawed hand against the cold metal of the viewport. His dark eyes stared into the endless black that had swallowed the stars 3,000 years ago. The darkness was complete, total, like being trapped inside a giant tomb that stretched across the entire galaxy. Behind him, the bridge of his ship's shadow's edge glowed softly with blue-green light. The panels on the walls pulsed gently, like the heartbeat of some deep-sea creature. This bioluminescent technology was all they had left. Every bit of light, every spark of energy, was precious beyond measure. His crew moved quietly through the dimly lit corridors, speaking in whispers as if afraid to waste even the energy of their voices. "Captain," came a crackling voice through the communication system. It was Zethik, his navigator. "We are getting close to the strange system. The readings are ... impossible." Vexmar's jaw clicked in irritation. The sound echoed through the quiet bridge like breaking bones. Impossible was a word that had lost all meaning in the long dark. Impossible was still being alive when 9 out of 10 stars had died. Impossible was keeping an empire running when energy itself was rarer than the most precious gems. Everything had become impossible, yet somehow they continued to exist. "Show me what you have found," Vexmar ordered, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through centuries of survival in the dark. The main viewing screen flickered to life, drawing power from their carefully hoarded energy reserves. What appeared on the screen made Vexmar's breath catch in his throat. His clawed hands gripped the armrests of his command chair so tightly that the metal began to bend. There, burning like a magnificent beacon in the endless night, was a star. Not the dying ember of a red dwarf, not the last gasping breath of a white dwarf cooling to nothing. This was a real star, alive and brilliant, with nuclear fusion reactions painting the surrounding space with warm golden light, and orbiting this impossible star was a small blue-green world that glowed with its own artificial lights. Cities sparkled across the planet's surface like scattered diamonds. Bright beams of energy reached out from the planet toward the star, as if the inhabitants were somehow drawing power directly from the nuclear furnace. Vexmar had seen many worlds during his long life. He had watched civilizations huddle around the last dying coals of their suns, rationing every photon of light like drops of water in an endless desert. He had seen entire species fade into extinction when their final power sources failed. But this world was different. This world was blazing with light, as if energy meant nothing to them. "How many inhabitants?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The readings suggest billions," Captain Zethik replied, his own voice filled with amazement. "They are using energy at levels we have not seen since the before times." Before the great darkness came, Vexmar stood slowly, his joints creaking. After hours, in the command chair, he walked closer to the viewing screen, studying the impossible sight before him. The star burned steady and strong, showing no signs of the instability that had claimed so many others. The planet below showed no signs of conservation. No darkened sectors where power had been cut off to save energy for more important areas. "They do not know," he said quietly, more to himself than to his crew. "They do not understand what they have on the surface of the impossible world called Earth." Dr. Jiho Kim stepped out of his small research facility and into the warm morning sunlight. He raised his face toward the golden star that hung in the blue sky above, feeling its warmth on his skin. It was something he did every morning, a small ritual that started his day with gratitude. The solar panels on his building's roof tracked the sun's movement automatically, gathering energy that would power his laboratory for the entire day. Around him, the city of Seoul hummed with activity. Electric vehicles moved silently through the streets, their batteries charged by the same endless source of energy that had powered human civilization for centuries. G. Ho walked to his latest project, an advanced solar collection array that could convert sunlight into usable energy with 90% efficiency. It was groundbreaking work, but he approached it with the casual confidence of someone who had never known scarcity. The sun would rise tomorrow, just as it had risen every day for billions of years. There would always be more energy, more light, more warmth. He had no idea that in the darkness above, alien eyes were watching his world with a mixture of wonder and fear. He could not imagine that his simple morning routine, his casual use of electric lights and solar panels, represented something that the rest of the galaxy considered impossible. As Jiho began his daily work, humming softly to himself in the bright sunlight, Captain Vexmar continued to stare at the viewing screen in his darkened ship. For the first time in 3,000 years, a Vorthok officer was looking at a world that had never known the long dark, and he was trying to decide whether this discovery would save his dying empire or destroy it completely. Dr. Minho Park pressed his face against the thick glass window of the Soul Space Command Center, watching something that should not exist. The alien ship moved through Earth's blue sky like a living creature, not like the metal spacecraft humans built. Its surface was smooth and curved, like a giant seed or egg, and soft light pulsed beneath its skin as if it had a heartbeat. "Sir," called Communications Officer Yuna Lee from her station across the room. "The aliens are sending us messages. They want to meet with our leaders, but their language is very strange. They keep calling our sun the miracle star and the impossible light." Minho rubbed his tired eyes. He had been awake for 18 hours since the alien ship first appeared on their sensors. As Earth's head of xenological studies, he was responsible for making first contact with any alien species. He had dreamed of this moment his entire career, but he had never imagined it would be so confusing. "What else are they saying?" he asked. Yuna frowned at her translation computer. "They keep asking if we know how precious our star is. They want to know if we understand that we are the only light in the endless dark. I think there might be errors in the translation software." "Maybe not," Minho said quietly. Something about the alien's words made him feel cold inside, though he could not explain why. 3 hours later, the meeting was arranged. The conference room on the 15th floor had been prepared with Earth's best diplomatic protocols. The table was polished, fresh flowers sat in vases, and bright fluorescent lights illuminated every corner of the room. When the alien delegation entered, their reaction was immediate and shocking. The three creatures stumbled backward, as if they had been physically struck. They raised their thin membrane-covered arms to shield their faces, making sounds of distress that the translation computers could barely interpret. "Turn off the burning," cried their leader, a tall, thin being that walked on 2 legs but moved like an insect. "You waste precious luminescence. How can you be so careless with light?" Dr. Minho Park looked at his colleague, Dr. Hannah Choi, with confusion. The aliens were acting as if the normal conference room lights were some kind of torture device. "I am sorry," Minho said carefully. "These are just our normal lights for meetings. Would you like us to make them dimmer?" The alien translator, who had introduced himself as Kethes, made a sound like air escaping from a broken pipe. "Normal," he repeated, and his voice carried a tone of absolute horror. "You burn energy as if it were infinite. Do you not understand that light dies? That darkness claims everything in the end?" Dr. Hannah Choi leaned forward in her chair, her scientific curiosity overcoming her diplomatic training. "Actually," she said, "our star produces more energy every single second than our entire human civilization could use in a full year. We have learned to capture and use what we call renewable energy." The three aliens became completely silent. For nearly a minute, they stood frozen in place, their large dark eyes staring at the humans as if they were looking at ghosts. Finally, Kethes began to speak, and his words came out slowly, as if each one caused him pain. He told them about the long dark, about how the galaxy's stars had begun dying 3,000 years ago in a chain reaction that spread from system to system. He described how billions of civilizations had watched their suns grow cold and die, how entire species had gone extinct when their last sources of energy failed. We who survived, Kethys said, learned to live with almost nothing. We harvest the heat from dying planets. We collect the last light from cooling stars. Every photon is precious. Every spark of energy must be saved, because when it is gone, there will be no more. Dr. Choi listened with growing amazement. But that is not permanent, she said. Stars can be restarted. Nuclear fusion can be reignited if you have the right technology. Dr. Park nodded in agreement. Our scientists have been studying stellar engineering for decades. We know it is possible to restart a dead star's fusion reactions. The three aliens stared at them in complete silence. Their large eyes seemed to grow even larger, and their thin bodies began to tremble. You speak of bringing the dead back to life, Kethys whispered. You talk of miracles that cannot exist. Stars that die remain dead forever. This is the law of the universe. No, said Dr. Choi firmly. That is just the law of your experience. Your species learned to survive in darkness, but you never learned to create light. We humans have been making artificial light for thousands of years. We know how to start fires, how to generate electricity, how to split atoms and fuse them back together. Minho stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city of Seoul sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. Electric signs flashed advertisements, cars moved along well-lit highways, and solar panels on building rooftops captured energy from the sun. Look outside, he said to the aliens. This is normal for us. We have never known your long dark we have always lived in the light. Kethys approached the window slowly, as if he were walking toward something dangerous. When he looked out at the bright, busy city below, he made a sound that the translation computer could not interpret. In that moment, both species realized they were looking at something they had never imagined could exist. The humans saw survivors from a dead galaxy. The aliens saw gods who had never learned that light could die. 6 months had passed since the aliens first landed on Earth. The initial wonder and excitement had turned into something much darker. President Sung Ho Kong stood in the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva, holding a message that had arrived that morning from the Vorthok Empire. The words were simple, but their meaning was terrifying. Submit to our rule, accept energy limits, or we will take your world by force. The hall was packed with representatives from every nation on Earth. Translators worked quietly in their booths, making sure everyone could understand what was happening. President Kong looked out at the worried faces and cleared his throat. The aliens have given us their final offer, he said, his voice echoing through the large room. They say they will let us live if we give up our freedom, change our way of life, and let them control our sun. Angry voices rose from the crowd. Someone shouted, "Never," in English, while others called out similar responses in dozens of different languages. President Kong raised his hand for silence. They believe they are being generous, he continued. In their experience, survival itself is a gift. They have lived in darkness for so long that they think asking us to do the same is reasonable. Dr. Jio Kim stood up from his seat in the science section. He was older now than when the aliens first arrived, his hair showing more gray, but his eyes were still bright with determination. Mr. President, he said, with respect, they are not asking us to survive. They are asking us to die slowly. Not just us, but every living thing in the galaxy, if we can prove that dead stars can be brought back to life. General Yoon Ji-song interrupted him. She was a practical woman who had spent her life dealing with military problems that had clear solutions. Dr. Kim, the alien scientists have already said that restarting dead stars is impossible. Their best physicists, who have studied this problem for 3,000 years, say it cannot be done. Dr. Kim smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Then we will have to prove that their best physicists are wrong. The room erupted in debate. Some people thought humanity should accept the alien terms and try to preserve what they could. Others demanded that Earth fight, even if the odds of winning were terrible. But Dr. Kim was not listening to the arguments. He was already thinking about fusion reactions, stellar cores, and the mathematical equations that governed how stars lived and died. 3 days later, Dr. Kim was sitting in a secret laboratory, buried deep under the Swiss mountains. The project had been given a simple name: stellar ignition. Scientists from every country had volunteered to work on it, even though they knew it might be humanity's last hope. Dr. Hannah Choi led the team working on fusion catalyst technology. She had been studying nuclear reactions since she was a graduate student, but now she was trying to solve problems that no human had ever attempted before. How do you restart a nuclear fire that has been cold for millions of years? Dr. Taiwu Lim designed the delivery systems. His job was to figure out how to get the catalysts into the center of a dead star, where the pressure was so great that atoms themselves were crushed into different shapes. For 9 months, they worked in secret. The alien ships patrolled Earth's solar system, watching and waiting for humanity's answer. The Vorthok seemed confident that humans would eventually see reason and accept their terms. They had never encountered a species that refused to accept the reality of the long dark. The test site was chosen carefully. 40 light-years from Earth, there was a failed star called the Brown Dwarf. It had never been massive enough to start fusion reactions on its own, so it had been cold and dead since the solar system formed billions of years ago. If the human technology could bring this failed star to life, it would prove that the darkness was not eternal. Captain Kumin Han commanded the test ship, New Dawn. He was a veteran space pilot who had volunteered for the mission, even though everyone knew it might be a one-way trip. If the stellar ignition failed, his ship would be stranded 40 light from home, with no way to call for help. Lieutenant Soyang Kwan worked at the engineering station, monitoring the complex systems that would either make history or destroy them all. She was young, barely 25. But she understood the fusion catalyst technology better than anyone except Dr. Choi herself. The ignition array took 6 hours to deploy around the Brown Dwarf. It looked like a giant metal flower with dozens of curved petals that would focus energy into the star's core. Each petal contained fusion catalysts that had taken months to manufacture on Earth. "All systems ready," Lieutenant Kwan reported. Her voice was steady, but Captain Han could see her hands shaking slightly as she worked at her controls. "Beginning stellar revival sequence," she announced. The array fired. Invisible particles shot through space at nearly the speed of light, penetrating deep into the Brown Dwarf's core. The particles were designed to trigger fusion reactions in hydrogen that had been too cold to ignite for billions of years. For 3 minutes, nothing happened. The Brown Dwarf remained dark and cold, just as it had always been. Captain Han began to wonder if the alien scientists had been right after all. Then the universe caught fire. The Brown Dwarf blazed to life like a newborn sun. Nuclear fusion spread through its core in waves of incredible energy. Light that had never existed before burst across the solar system, illuminating planets that had been frozen in darkness since they formed. Captain Han's message reached Earth 6 hours later. "The impossible is done. The dead star lives. Let the galaxy know that darkness does not have to be forever." The rebellion started in places the Vorthok Empire had forgotten about. News of the rekindled star traveled through space faster than anyone expected. Alien communication networks carried the impossible message from world to world, system to system. The Vorthok tried to stop the information, but it was like trying to hold back an ocean with their bare hands. On the mining planet called Kefter, thousands of Zephyrian slaves worked in the dark tunnels below ground. They had been digging for rare minerals for so many generations that most had never seen natural starlight. Their masters, the Vorthok overseers, kept them working 20 hours a day with only small artificial lights to guide them. But on the night the news arrived, something changed forever. Thelanox was a Zephyrian who had been born in the mines 40 years ago. His blue-scaled skin was scarred from years of hard labor, and his large eyes had grown weak from working in dim light. Like all his people, he had been taught that darkness was the natural state of the universe. The Vorthok told them that accepting this darkness was wisdom. That night, Thelanox climbed to the surface for his brief rest period. He looked up at the black sky, just as he had done every night for 40 years. But this time, something was different. There, burning bright against the endless dark, was a new star. It was small and far away, but it was real. Thelanox stared at it until his eyes watered, afraid that if he looked away, it might disappear. Other Zephyrians came to the surface and gathered around him, all of them pointing at the impossible light in the sky. "The humans did it," whispered an old female named Cassara. She had been listening to forbidden radio transmissions from the outer systems. They brought a dead star back to life. The word spread through the mining tunnels like wildfire. The dead could be brought back to life. The darkness was not eternal, and somewhere in the galaxy, there were beings who could paint light across the black sky. Commander Young Min Park was patrolling the edge of Earth's solar system when the message reached his ship. He was a career military officer who had spent the last year training for the war everyone knew was coming. The Vorthok Empire would not let humanity's defiance go unpunished forever. "Commander," called his communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Kefter system. It's from the slaves on the mining worlds." The voice that came through the speakers was rough and filled with static, but the words were clear. "This is Zephyrian Resistance Leader, Thelanox. We have heard that your people can wake the dead stars. Help us bring light to our world, and we will help you free the galaxy." Within 6 months, everything had changed. The human fleet grew larger every week. Each time they rekindled a dead star, more alien species joined their cause. The Valtheri brought their crystal ships that could focus starlight into powerful energy beams. The Kafani contributed their knowledge of gravity manipulation. Even some Vorthok colonies rebelled against their own empire and offered their services to the human-led alliance. Dr. Ji-Ho Kim stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Stellar Phoenix. He was no longer just a scientist working in a laboratory. He had become the leader of the Stellar Ignition Program, commanding a fleet of vessels designed specifically to bring dead stars back to life. "Systems ready for ignition sequence," reported Chief Engineer Myra Jang. She was young and brilliant, one of hundreds of Earth's best scientists who had volunteered for the dangerous work of star resurrection. Below them, a red giant star that had been cooling for 2,000 years waited for its second chance at life. The human ignition array surrounded the dying star like a metal web, ready to inject the precise combination of particles needed to restart nuclear fusion. "Begin sequence," Dr. Kim ordered. The array fired, and once again, the impossible happened. The dying red giant blazed back to full life, its nuclear heart beating strongly once more. Light that had been fading for millennia suddenly burned bright and steady, warming planets that had been frozen for generations. "That makes 17 systems brought back to life," Chief Engineer Jang reported with a smile. "The Vorthok are getting nervous. Our intelligence reports say they're gathering their main fleet at the Cygnus Junction." Admiral Dong Hae-shin received the same intelligence report aboard his flagship. He was a veteran naval officer who had adapted quickly to three-dimensional space combat. Around him, the bridge hummed with activity as officers from 6 different alien species worked together to coordinate the Liberation Fleet. The tactical display showed the Vorthok position clearly. They had positioned their remaining warships around 5 dead star systems, using the gravity wells as natural fortresses. It was a smart defensive strategy, but Admiral Shin could see the fear behind it. "They are calling their position the Last Darkness," reported his intelligence officer, a former Vorthok defector named Yik. "Their commanders believe that if they can stop us here, they can preserve their empire." Admiral Shin studied the display for a long moment. His fleet was outnumbered, but he had something the Vorthok did not: hope. They want a battle, he said to his mixed-species staff. But we are not here to fight a war. We are here to end a dark age that has lasted 3,000 years. The Battle of Five Suns began at dawn, ship time. It lasted for 3 days of continuous fighting, with energy weapons lighting up the darkness between the dead stars. When it finally ended, the Vorthok fleet was retreating in disorder, and 5 more star systems blazed with newborn light. The golden paint was spreading across the black canvas of space, 1 star at a time. The center of the galaxy had been dark for 3,000 years. Admiral Donghae Shin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Light-Bearer, and looked out at the thing that had destroyed everything. The supermassive black hole at the galaxy's heart was invisible, but he could feel its presence. It pulled at space itself, bending reality around it, like a giant fist crushing everything nearby. This monster had started it all. 3,000 years ago, something had gone wrong with the black hole's gravity. It had sent shockwaves through space that made nearby stars unstable. Those stars had exploded or collapsed, and their destruction had spread outward like a disease, killing star after star until most of the galaxy went dark. "Admiral," called Captain Jiwan Ko from her station. "The Vorthok are making their final stand. They have positioned all their remaining ships around the core worlds. If we fail here, we will not fail," Admiral Shin said quietly, though his heart was beating fast with fear and excitement. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Dr. Jiho Kim and his team had worked for 2 years to prepare for this day. They were not just going to restart one dead star. They were going to fix the galactic core itself and wake up every sleeping star in the entire galaxy. The Allied fleet that surrounded the galactic core was beyond anything anyone had imagined possible. Ships from 40 different species floated in formation, their metal hulls covered with solar collectors, designed by human engineers. The blue-scaled Zephyrians flew their sleek vessels, alongside the crystal ships of the Velthari. Even former Vorthok colonies had joined the fight, their bioorganic vessels glowing softly as they prepared for battle against their former masters. "All stations report ready," announced Communications Officer Hai Jin-yu. Her voice was calm, but Admiral Shin could hear the excitement underneath. "The ignition array is in position." The device they had built was the most incredible thing humans had ever created. It was a network of fusion catalysts as large as a small moon, designed to create a controlled nuclear fire in the disk of matter that spiraled around the black hole. If it worked, it would stabilize the gravitational monster and send waves of stellar ignition rippling across the entire galaxy. If it failed, the black hole might become even more unstable, and the few remaining stars would die forever. Admiral Shin opened the communication channel that connected him to every ship in the fleet. Thousands of beings from dozens of different worlds would hear his words. "This is Admiral Shin to all vessels," he said, his voice carrying across the darkness. 3,000 years ago, our galaxy fell into darkness. Today, we paint the sky gold again, begins stellar revival sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if the impossible could happen one more time. Then the stars began to sing. It started at the galactic core, where the massive ignition array fired its catalysts into the black hole's accretion disk. The disk blazed to life like a giant campfire, creating a stable ring of nuclear fire that tamed the gravitational monster at the galaxy's heart. From that central fire, waves of energy rippled outward through space. When the waves reached dead stars, something miraculous happened. Nuclear fusion rekindled in cores that had been cold for millennia. Stars that had been sleeping for thousands of years suddenly blazed back to life. The effect spread faster than light itself, carried by exotic particles that Dr. Kim's team had discovered during their research. Star after star awakened from its ancient sleep, their fusion hearts beating strongly once more. The darkness that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years began to crack apart like a broken eggshell. Red giants blazed back to full brightness. White dwarf stars pulled in new material and reignited. Even brown dwarf failures that had never successfully started fusion suddenly caught fire and became real stars. The light spread outward in a golden wave, illuminating worlds that had been frozen in darkness for generations. On planet after planet, alien species looked up at their night skies and saw something their ancestors had only dreamed about, a galaxy full of living stars. On Earth, President Sun Wukong stood in the garden behind his house, watching the night sky transform above him. He was an old man now, but his eyes were bright with wonder as he watched the impossible happen, where there had once been only scattered points of light. Now the entire galaxy blazed with renewed fire. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a ribbon of gold, brighter than anyone alive had ever seen it. Dr. Jiho Kim walked into the garden, carrying his 5-year-old daughter, Sumin. The little girl had been born after the war began, and she had never known a world without hope. "Daddy," she said, tugging on his coat, "why is the sky so bright?" Dr. Kim looked up at the galaxy that blazed above them, thinking about all the years of work, all the battles fought, all the impossible things they had accomplished. His daughter would grow up in a universe full of light, never knowing the long dark that had ruled before she was born. He pointed to the ribbon of gold that stretched across the heavens. "Because, sweetheart, someone had to paint it." The black sky had endured for 3,000 years, convincing entire civilizations that darkness was eternal and unchangeable. But Earth had painted it gold, and the galaxy would never be dark again.